Oh, look, I've traveled to a new location. Now you can enjoy the aurora borealis behind me. Oh, I'm such a nerd. So much fun. Anyway, I gotta download some pictures now that I know this works, man. I gotta find some good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the nucleus. Shall we? Shall we? Shall we? And right away you're like, nucleus, what? What did she write up here? Okay, so nucleus is singular, meaning that's the term that we use if we're talking about one of them. Nuclei is plural. And so I wrote nuclei here in the title because in this you're looking at a total of 4 different nuclei. So once again, one of the things I like about your book is it does this cute little thing where it makes the rest of the cell gray and it just highlights in color the part we're looking at. So there's a nucleus in a plant cell, there's the nucleus in an animal cell. Why is there not a picture of a prokaryotic cell here? That's right, because they don't have nuclei. Okay, and then here's some real life pictures that are kind of cool. So those are cells that have been stained, of course, right? That is not their natural color. In fact, these aren't even, these are electron microscope pictures, but whatever, we're not going to get into that. But yeah, see all the color, okay, and so you can see the nucleus in the middle. So it takes up quite a large portion of the cell, I would say. Okay, so there's a nucleus, all bigified. And then here's another one on the bottom side with the plant cell. The nucleus, the job of the nucleus is the nucleus contains DNA. And DNA is the instructions for the cell. We have not talked about what that means yet. We're going to, okay? In fact, your book kind of starts to do that a little bit in this chapter. I don't think it's necessary because we're going to talk about it later. So, when you're reading that part in the book, just kind of be like, okay, transcription, translation, blah, blah, blah. Just kind of ignore it for now, okay? But essentially, the nucleus is where the DNA is housed, okay? More about that later. There are some parts of the nucleus that you should recognize because it's kind of a complex thing, right? So it has what we call the nuclear envelope. And the nuclear envelope is made of a double membrane. So literally it's 2 bilayers. So it's one bilayer on the outside and then another bilayer on the inside. So it's literally a double membrane that acts as the boundary, okay? There are little holes in that envelope called nuclear pores. Those are important because things need to be able to move in and out of a nucleus. Okay, so those little pores are where things move in and out. Like I said, this will be important later. Okay, you can see all of these, they look like little strings, right? All of that stuff is the DNA. More about the different names that we call DNA and how DNA is organized later. We're not going to worry about that yet. Your book does a little bit. We're not going to do that just yet. Oh, look, that's cool. You can see the aurora on my pen. Right. Oh, it's gone. Oh, that's weird. Sorry. Okay. In the center of the nucleus is something called the nucleolus, which literally means nucleus of the nucleus. We care about the nucleolus because it makes ribosomes, which you don't know what that is yet. You will in a second. Okay. So that's what's happening in the nucleolus. Sometimes cells have more than one nucleolus, in which case we would say that a cell has many nucleoli. Okay. So that's the nucleus, right? So here's kind of a cool close-up, right? So there's the membrane, the nuclear envelope, right? And there's the pore, things coming in and out. Specifically, it's RNA molecules are coming in and out. Yeah, this is what it kind of looks like in real life. I mean, this is stained, of course, but, whatever. Okay, so that's cool. So that's, yeah. So that's the nucleus. And we'll talk more about parts of the nucleus again when we talk about cell division, okay? And when we talk about protein synthesis. So there will be, the nucleus will come up again. Now let's focus on organelles. So the smallest organelle by far are ribosomes, okay? So let's go back to like a big old picture. Let's go back to our generalized animal cell, right? So this big purple thing is the nucleus. And then do you see these little, are they brown? Are they red? I don't know. Russet colored? These little dots. Those little dots represent ribosomes. And conveniently, this even tells you about them, right? So they are where proteins are manufactured, all right? And yeah, okay? And so they can be floating around independently, or they can be stuck to this other organelle that's called the endoplasmic reticulum, which we'll look at in just a second, okay? So here is a ribosome highly magnified. As it turns out, it has several like parts to it. Ultimately, what it does is it makes proteins. Okay, cool. And we'll talk about how later, not yet, but later, okay? Sometimes ribosomes are attached to a layer of membrane called the endoplasmic reticulum, which people often abbreviate as ER because endoplasmic reticulum is a mouthful. You do need to know the word though, okay? The ER in a cell is part of what is called the endomembrane system. And so what you're looking at down here, see how they've highlighted several organelles, not just one, but there's the blue stuff and then the green stuff and then also the nucleus they kind of highlighted too. Because what they're trying to get you to appreciate is the fact that there's this group of organelles that all kind of work together. And the name of that grouping is, we call that the endomembrane system. I don't think your book uses that term. They talk about them, but they don't use the term. Okay, so endo means inside. You already know that, right? Because of endocytosis. And then membrane just means membranes. So essentially what the endomembrane system is a bunch of membranes inside of the cell. The endomembrane system, okay? So the first part of the endomembrane system is the endoplasmic reticulum. It comes in two varieties. It comes in a rough variety and a smooth variety. The rough variety is called that because it has all these little bumps on it that make it look rough underneath the microscope, like studded, okay? Those little bumps are ribosomes. Since you already know what ribosomes do, what do you think happens on the rough ER? What do ribosomes do? They make proteins. So rough ER is a place where proteins are made, right? So proteins made here, right? So specifically it's the ribosomes that are doing it, but it's happening on the rough ER. So it would be kind of like saying, this is the machine in the factory that makes a Barbie doll. So the factory is where you make the Barbie doll. Well, actually, it's the machine that makes the Barbie doll. So the ribosome is like the machine, and then the factory is like the rough ER. Okay, so it's the place where the proteins are being made. Okay, smooth ER is called smooth because it does not have any ribosomes on it. Do you think it can make proteins? It cannot. So it synthesizes. Synthesizes, by the way, is just a fancy name for makes lipids. It also breaks them down too. Yeah, synthesize just means it makes something, right? So it synthesizes lipids instead of proteins. You know what lipids are, you remember. And if you don't, go back to chapter 2. Read that again. Okay? So that's the ER, endoplasmic reticulum. There's two types. It is one of the components of the endomembrane system. Okay? Another component of the endomembrane system is something called the Golgi apparatus. So that is a very strange name. It was named after an Italian guy named Golgi, interestingly enough. Okay, and so the Golgi apparatus is next to the ER, okay? And what the Golgi apparatus does is the rough ER is where proteins are made, but they're not necessarily done. They're not complete. So when you were a kid, in high school biology, right, and you were learning about the Golgi apparatus, you probably learned to call them the UPS of the cell because they package and ship proteins. But it's really more than that. They package, they ship, they sort, they store. So it does all kinds of management of proteins. And so really, I like to think of the Golgi apparatus more like a warehouse, right? So, you know, it's where the proteins have their final assembly, the parts come together, or they're stored until they're needed, or they're sorted and separated and then sent somewhere. Okay, so that's what the Golgi apparatus does. Okay, so sorts, stores, sorts, stores. Somebody's listening to music outside. Ships, modifies, etc. proteins. Okay, also part of the endomembrane system. So here we can see the whole combination together, right? So here's the nucleus in that kind of dusty lavender color. And so we're not going to worry about the process of transcription or translation yet. We are going to learn about them, but that's later, okay? So RNA is made inside of the nucleus, it leaves, and then out in the rough ER is where the majority of translation occurs, and that's how proteins are made. Look at our little ribosome doing translation, okay? And that's how proteins are made. Proteins are packaged often in little vesicles. So remember that a vesicle, a transport vesicle, is just a little bubble of membrane, which makes sense because remember, all of this stuff is just membranes. It's just it's the same as the plasma membrane on the outside of the cell, but inside of the cell, endomembrane system. So a vesicle is just a little package of membrane. And so that protein gets carried over to the Golgi apparatus, and then it gets sorted and stored and modified, whatever, right? And then it goes to its eventual destination. Okay, so like going from the factory, going from planning to factory to warehouse, and then to final destination. Okay, all right. Lysosomes are another part of the endomembrane system. They are the name, so some or soma means body, and lys means to break. So the word lysosome literally means break down body, right? And what lysosomes do is they contain enzymes that break apart like foreign substances inside of cells or like old busted stuff inside of cells. So in this example, they're showing you a lysosome. Look, it's got those little purple digestive enzymes in it. And here we've got an old mitochondrion that no longer works and it needs to be recycled, right? And so here this little vesicle is fusing with the lysosome and the digestive enzymes break apart the mitochondrion so that it can be recycled, okay? So these are like the recyclers in your cell, lysosomes, okay? Also endomembrane system, believe it or not, okay? Not so much in animal cells, but a lot of other eukaryotes have various different types of vacuoles. A vacuole is another, essentially, another pouch of membrane inside of the cell that holds stuff usually, or it can do other things too. So plant cells often have a large central vacuole. So you see that huge blue space. So the nucleus is this orange thing and it's shoved over to the side because the central vacuole is huge and it stores water or other things. It can store starch, it can store pigments, it can store all kinds of things inside of the cell. Fungi can have vacuoles too. Certain protists like this little paramecium have these cool vacuoles that actually like pump water out of the cell, which is kind of cool. And they look like little starbursts. They like, if you've seen them alive, they're real cool to look at under a microscope because they like these little vacuoles. It's kind of a neat little thing. Anyway, okay. So another type of internal membrane. I hope you're seeing a theme here, that most of these organelles are membranes inside of the cell. Okay. We also have organelles that are important for energy conversion. So specifically, one type of energy conversion is photosynthesis. And this is what we're going to be learning about next week. So next week, we're going to talk about energy conversion in cells. And so we're going to learn the details of what a chloroplast does, right? So did I even label this, or was I just like, oh no, yeah, see, I didn't even label it. So chloroplast, right? So it's an organelle that is found within the cell that is responsible for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. And we'll learn this equation and learn how photosynthesis happens next week. So we're not going to talk about the details of it now, but that's what happens here. And essentially, once again, it's just a bunch of membranes. This little guy is a mitochondrion. So mitochondria is plural, mitochondrion is singular, and it also is basically just a pouch. It's a bunch of membranes. Amazing. And it does cellular respiration, which is another type of energy conversion. Okay. Now notice, this is important. Notice they are highlighting and showing you mitochondria in both animal cells and also in plant cells. Mitochondria are found in both animal cells and plant cells. In fact, mitochondria are found in all eukaryotes. Chloroplasts, on the other hand, are only found in plants and algae. Okay, so animals don't have chloroplasts. If we did, instead of having to eat lunch, we could just go and sit out in the sun, recharge. But we can't do that. I mean, we can spiritually recharge, but not actual energy from the sun. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. And then some other kind of minor organelles inside. Minor, they're not minor. They're just as important. I don't even know what I'm talking about. How do cells maintain their shape? Well, plant cells partly maintain their shape, using their cell walls, right? So here's some pictures of cell walls. I already kind of talked about it, right? Basically, cell walls are found in plants. They're also found in fungi, and my background just glitched on me a second. So they're found in plants, they're found in fungi, they're found in a bunch of protists, okay? Not in animals, though. No cell walls in your cells, okay? And they're rigid, and they provide a certain amount of like structural support around the outside of the cell, okay? In animal cells, though, and protists that don't have cell walls, how do our cells maintain a shape? Right? Well, we don't have a outer hard, rigid covering, so how do we maintain our shape? Well, by using an internal skeleton. Okay, so cells, oh, my hair is big today. Cells have an internal skeleton called the cytoskeleton, cell skeleton. And it's made of all these little microscopic little microtubules and microfilaments. You don't need to know all those names, right? But they do two things for the cell. They give it internal structure, like the same way that the bones in your body give you structure. There's these little fibers and filaments inside of cells that give it support. They're also responsible for movement. Okay, so cytoskeleton is responsible for support and movement, right? And so this little amoeba right here, you're supposed to be imagining this as an action shot. He's sending out little extensions of his plasma membrane, right, called pseudopodia. And those pseudopodia are how he crawls around. Pseudopodia means false foot. Pseudo, fake. Pod, foot, like the podiatrist. When you go to the podiatrist, it's because you have foot problems, right? So pseudopodia are false feet. So it has these little extensions of their plasma membrane that have microtubules and whatnot inside that are responsible for movement. Okay, so that's what the cytoskeleton does. It's responsible for support and movement. And many cells have extensions of the cytoskeleton called cilia and flagella. The difference between cilia and flagella primarily is that cilia are typically numerous and they're shorter. So they're like little short hairs that beat. They wave like this. And so sometimes they're responsible for moving a cell. So if we go back to our little paramecium friend back here, right? You can't really see them very well. But on the edges of that guy, he has all these like microscopically tiny little hairs called cilia, and they beat, and that's how he moves around. And he can move fast with those little cilia, right? So some animals, some protists move around using their cilia. In our bodies, we have cilia that do not move a cell, but rather move substances in the body. So my favorite location where you have cilia is in your trachea and in your lungs. And so your lungs are lined with cells that make mucus. And that mucus is really important because it collects all the like crap, all the particulate matter that you inhale. And your cilia in your lungs are beating in an upwards direction. And so what they're doing is they're taking that mucus that's lining your lungs, that's collecting all the crud that you're breathing, and they're bringing that crud up. And so when you clear your throat, essentially what you're doing is all the cilia that have brought all that mucus up to the top of your throat, when you clear your throat, what you're doing is you're basically like coughing it up the rest of the way and swallowing it to get it out of your lungs, which is really important because you don't want crud in your lungs. Lungs are far too delicate to have a bunch of crud in them. Yeah. So the cilia in your lungs are very important because they keep crap out of your lungs, right? If your lungs get too much of a buildup of fluid in them, we call that pneumonia, and it can be deadly depending on how severe it is, right? It can be very, very bad. So your cilia are really important. P.S. This is one of the first things that goes wrong when people smoke, right? And I don't just mean smoking tobacco. I mean anytime you're inhaling any kind of burning plant material, you know what I'm talking about, right? And for that matter, if you are vaping, right? So the chemicals in smoke as well as vape liquid, one of the most immediate impacts of that is that they basically paralyze your cilia. So rather than moving your mucus, they can't move your mucus anymore. This is why people who are heavy smokers have a really like nasty cough. They're always like, right? Because they have to cough to get the mucus out of their lungs because their cilia aren't doing their jobs, right? But the cool thing about quitting smoking is that when you quit, your cilia come back to life essentially within 24 hours. It's amazing. Amazing, right? It's never too late to quit. Anyway, okay. So that's cilia. Flagella are essentially made of the same stuff, but we use the term flagellum when it's one or a couple much longer hairs that are used for propulsion, right? So in humans, the only cells in humans that have flagella are sperm, the only one. In other animals and plants, all kinds of cells have flagella, right? Even bacteria can have flagella. It's a different kind of flagellum, but still, right? So this is Helicobacter pylori, H. pylori, which is what causes stomach ulcers. And it has these really cool long flagella to help it move around, okay? So that's part of the cytoskeleton as well, all right? That's all the organelles of the cell. So we done, all right? There's a little table for you to fill in. It is not an assignment. It is just an optional thing and that you might choose to help you study. Yeah. Okay, it's in the same page where you found this video and the PowerPoint and everything else. Okay, so use it if you want. All right, that's it. Okay, so have a lovely week, y'all. The lab this week is fun. It takes time, though. Give yourself plenty of time. Plenty of time, at least 3 hours. Don't wait until Friday night to do it, y'all. I'm serious. I'm always serious, but I'm especially serious this time. Okay. See you in the next Zoom.